front of it.
Well, that's your problem. Okay, I'm going to move down. All right, this is for Algebra 2. Are you taping, my dear?
Yes.
This is 5A-2. Thank you. All right, when you get ready to solve these, if you ever have something more than just to the first power, like notice you have things to the second to the third power, you want to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to move this guy to the other side. Notice if it's a minus 4x, when I move it to the other side, it's a plus 4x. And then factor. So I factor out the greatest common thing I can, which it looks like it would be a 2x. And that gives me what? 3x squared plus 5x plus 2. Okay? Then you have to factor what's on the inside. And I like this one because it's not easy to factor. Okay? And I taught you guys this little cute way of factoring in class. Remember to do what's called the Lizzie method. I take 3 times 2, which is 6. I'm looking for factors of 6 that add up to this middle term. So that would be what? 3 and 2? No, 3 times 2 would give you 5. Okay, 3 times 2 give me 6. And then I take this guy. Just ignore the exponent just for a minute. Write him twice. I'm going to write him as a little fraction. I'm going to write these magic pieces under there, any order you want. Now sometimes the fraction won't reduce. That one doesn't. This one will because 3 will go into 3 one time. Okay, so in my 2 sets of parentheses, I'm going to have an x plus 1, and this would be a 3x plus 2. And then don't forget you factored out this 2x. Now this is factored, but it wants me to solve. So you're going to have to take all 3 factors and set them equal to 0. So I'm going to move over here. I've got to have to take 2x and set it equal to 0. I'm going to have to take x plus 1 and set it equal to 0, and 3x plus 2 and set it equal, and solve each one. You can see here if you divide both sides by 2, you would get x equals 0. Here if you subtract 1 from both sides, you would get x equals -1. Here if you solve, subtract 2 from both sides, so you're going to get 3x equals -2. I know I'm squishing it in there. You're going to get x equals -2/3. Okay, so you're going to get 3 answers. You got 3 answers because remember originally it was x to the 3rd. All right. Okay, let's try another one because that was so fun. Okay, remember you want to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. -14 minus 10 is what? -24. I'm going to factor out if there's something common, and there is. I can pull out a 2. Okay, and then factor. This is a 1, so this is easier to factor. So I'm going to do that. X times x is x squared. Are there factors of -12 that add up to -4? And I would say, yeah, -6 and 2. So in one I'll have a -6, and in the other one a +2. Now you have 3 factors here. This one would never equal a 0 because there's not an x there, so you don't have to worry about him. It's only, remember this guy over here, come back over here. See how that one had an x? You did have to set it equal to 0. This one doesn't have an x, so we're going to ignore him. But this guy could equal 0. You can even do it mentally. What would make him 0? 6, because you can see 6 minus 6 is 0. What would make this factor 0? -2. Good job. So you have 2 answers. You have 2 answers because why? It was to the 2nd power. Okay? All right, we're going to try another one. Look at this guy. Set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 50x from both sides. Ooh, that's cool. That gives me what? A -100x. Pull out what's common. Oh, I hope you guys remember how to factor that. That is the difference of squares. Notice there's just 2 terms and they're both perfect squares. It's a minus sign, so it's going to be x times x is x squared. Signs have to be different. 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, notice down here we have 3 factors. 1, 2, 3, and they all have an x in it. That means they could all somehow give you 0. Either this guy could be 0, or how are you going to get 0 here? What does x have to be? -10. Or a +10. Notice you have 1, 2, 3 answers. Isn't that interesting?
So interesting.
I know. Last but not least, guess what? This is a positive squared term, so I'm going to move the 8 over here. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I've got 0 equals a squared. Okay, as long as this is a 1, these are easy to factor, okay? So I'm just going to do this. A times A. Can you find factors of 28 that add up to -16? Okay, and I would be like, sure, 14 and 2, that adds up to 16, but look, I need it to add up to negative 16. Well, then just make them both negative. Notice that adds up to negative 16, but when I multiply, it gives me a positive 28. So one's a negative 14 and one's a negative 2. I only have 2 factors. That means I'm going to have 2 answers. What makes this guy 0? I would say 14, because 14 minus 14 is 0, or 2. Isn't that dandy? And enjoy.